Yes, people, I told you I'll be back. I'm back in my favourite place. This is my bench now. It's called the Forde bench. Anyway, enough of that. I'm joined with this guy. You've seen this guy by now. If you watch Newcastle United content, you should know who he is. Johnny Greenwood. We always have a little bit of back and forth, don't we?
I don't know what you're on about. I've no idea what you're on about. We never fall out, do we?
Nah, never. Yeah, right. Anyway, so I've got a couple of topics to discuss, and I thought, who better to discuss it with than this guy? So, everyone would have watched the Wolves versus Newcastle game. Yes, we came away with a draw. Shock. I just wanted to discuss a couple of things that I noticed. Now, the first thing, Nick Pope, he had a bit of a shocker. So, the question I'm going to ask, and you would have seen it in the thumbnail and the title by now, should Nick Pope be dropped?
No.
Why not?
Because he had a couple of funny performances, shall we say.
Funny?
Yeah, I would say Brighton was a funny performance, and I'd say Wolves was a funny performance, but you've got to remember how many times he's kept Newcastle in games and how steady he's been. Look, we all know where Nick Pope weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. However, it was a very un-Nick Pope performance on Saturday, in the sense that it wasn't his kicking that was the issue, it was his decision making.
Yeah, but we're seeing that too many times now. Look, you've just mentioned two performances this season. I remember back to the Liverpool game last season, and I'm sure if I had the time, which I don't really, but if I had the time, I could go through a couple games where Nick Pope's had a stinker, and we need him to be on top form, don't we? Come on.
We do, but to counter that, how many times has Nick Pope kept us in games? How many times has Nick Pope done almost man-of-the-match performances to keep Newcastle in games? Like, Newcastle had the best defensive record last season with Manchester City.
But is that all down to Nick Pope? I know we all pull that one out all the time, but is that solely down to Nick Pope?
Of course it's not, but it's a team, it's the defence. So that defence is solid as a rock, and that goalkeeper is solid as a rock. But he's not going to be amazing every single performance. But what you want from your goalkeeper is to make the right decisions. You look at the game on Saturday against Wolves. I'm more annoyed with him in the second goal than I am the first goal. I think the first goal, he just gets caught out by how good the cross is, and to an extent, I think the defending's a bit questionable as well. But the second one, I thought that was bread and butter. That was bread and butter for Nick Pope, such as an easy catch to go, that's mine. And there's been so many times we've seen, particularly St James's Park, Forde, when we see Nick Pope come out, you know he's going to get it. And
I should hope so.
But to counter that second goal as well, we didn't do well enough from that punch. There was three players around one Wolves player, and he's managed to get past all three Newcastle players. I think Almiron was involved, I think Bruno was involved, and it was still such an easy goal. But going back to your main question, Nick Pope won't be dropped because there's nobody better that we've got at the minute.
Really? You've not heard of Martin Dubravka?
He's not better than Nick Pope.
But come on, man. He's got to give an opportunity. Like, we've got big games coming up. We've got a lot of games coming up this season. Champions League, Cup games, Premier League games. There's no shame in giving him a rest or whatever.
Do you know what it is? Under any normal circumstances, I would be saying to put Martin Dubravka in on Wednesday night. However, because it's against Manchester United and because of how much of a shithouse that whole deal was last year, I'll be either putting Nick Pope in or Loris Karius. And just out of pure spite, more than anything. I don't really care. I think Karius is fine for one game.
Okay, right. Ignore the whole Dubravka did us dirty and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
If we put in Karius, then would you agree with that?
For the Man United game, I wouldn't have an issue with, because he's going to need a rest at some point. But in terms of,
so you basically agree with me? He should be dropped then.
For a cup game, yes. Not for the big games. We've got Arsenal on Saturday.
But you're saying that's not a big game? Hold on, we got to the cup final. That's a big game for us.
I'll spin it to you. What would the club say is the most important competition for Newcastle this season?
Right, I would say the league, obviously.
Okay, so which goalkeeper is going to be playing in the league?
Well, you know Eddie Howe is loyal to a fault. You know it's going to be Nick Pope. But I'm asking you, Newcastle fan, goes to games. Yeah.
Nick Pope starts on Saturday against Arsenal. You've answered your own question, Forde, because he's been the best goalkeeper out of don't get me wrong, when we first brought in Nick Pope, I was a bit undecided. I was thinking, is he that better than Martin Dubravka? However, but that was 18 months ago. I've seen Nick Pope put in stellar performances week in, week out. You know, he's not been many performances where you go, Nick Pope cost us the game. That's how I look at it. I think on Saturday it wasn't just Nick Pope that cost Newcastle from winning the game. I think it was a poor performance all around, which I'm sure we'll discuss later.
There's not loads of performances like that, but the thing is with a goalkeeping situation, once they make an error, most of the time it leads to a goal, and we can't afford to do that.
I take your point, but the second goal in particular it's that mistake didn't essentially cost Newcastle the goal. There were still more things that could have been done to stop that particular second goal. You know, if it was a case that he flapped it in the air and Wolves had it past him and it goes in the back of the net somehow, then fair enough. I think that's a fair argument. But The only thing I think a lot of people will be saying, even though he should catch the ball, he still punched it far away in an area that we can still defend from better, and that's where I come back to my point where we should have stopped it on the second phase, if you like.
I think performances like this is the reason why he's not number one. We always scream like England's number one or it should be England's number one, but I think these are the reasons why. These are the little margins that separate him from being a top goalkeeper.
I think he is a top goalkeeper, but his biggest weakness is what Gareth Southgate likes in a goalkeeper, and that is to be very, very good with his feet. To counter that, I do think he is a little bit better with his feet than he was last season. However, when you put him in the likes of a Pickford, a Sam Johnston, and Aaron Ramsdale, he's absolutely nowhere near in terms of quality with his feet. Shot stopping, I'd argue he's the best out of the lot.
Yeah,
I'd argue that. I think coming out and collecting crosses, I think he's up there with the best, if not the best. However, in the way that football's being played at the minute, the almost Guardiola, type of football, if you like, you need your goalkeeper to be almost an outfield player at times. Yeah. Yes, you want to keep the ball at the back, and that is probably still the most important thing. But you look at every top team in terms of how they like to play football. Newcastle are in that category. Mm-hmm. They want to play from the back. They want to keep the ball as long as possible. I still feel there's a couple of times that you can't do that all the time. You can't be perfect. You sometimes just have to go long. You see Edison do that for Man City. Yeah. Just go long. Sometimes you have to.
But the thing is, Edison's got in his locker at the moment, and Alisson's got in his locker, but Pope hasn't. And if you look at, okay, I know Lee, you're gonna be watching this, but top teams like Arsenal, Arteta, ruthless. Ramsdale had a decent season last season. Brings in Raya, starts him straight away. Is that's what's separating us from being in amongst it, because we're not going to be playing around no more. Yes, we're happy to be top 4 last season, great, but if we want to push on now, do we need to make sure that we get a top keeper that can play with his feet?
In terms of top 4, Nick Pope can still do a job, because you look at what we had last season. He was one of the main reasons, and some people argue he was the player of the season last year. I don't think he was, but there was an argument there that because of his performances. I saw a couple of people say on social media that if Nick Pope's position will be looked at, I still think it's probably another year too soon. I think if you can get 3 good years out of Nick Pope, he's still, like, for a goalkeeper, he's 31, I think. Mm-hmm. That's still quite young for a goalkeeper. You're looking at your 35, 36, 37, where you kind of, we're not kind of expecting the best from you anymore. However, I still think he's got a couple of years at that very, very top bracket of performances. But I do think there will become a time where you go, right, well, we want a younger goalkeeper, we want a keeper that can do a bit more. And it wouldn't surprise me if that happens in the future or in the near future, but I'm still very comfortable if I see Nick Pope's name on the team sheet forward. I think he is still a top goalkeeper. Is he the best goalkeeper in the Premier League? He's not. Mm-hmm. But what he is for Newcastle, he's a safe pair of hands.
Is he? Because again, I'll come back to this. I'll clip this out. If he has a howler and he flaps it, you just said that he's a safe pair of hands.
He is a safe pair of hands. But you can only judge from what we've seen from the last 18 months, Forde. He is a safe pair of hands. Like they say, remember the last home game of the season against Leicester? He had nothing to do for 92 minutes and pulls out a save. Essentially to get us over the line in terms of getting us into the Champions League. The AC Milan performance, he was the man of the match at the San Siro. The amount of saves he made just in the first half alone was enough to kind of go, we've got a top goalkeeper here. He's a Champions League goalkeeper. He might be not Newcastle's number 1 goalkeeper in a couple of years' time, but he's certainly not someone that should be dropped. It was one performance where he made a questionable, poor decision. However, I'm still comfortable with him in goal. Dubravka's not better than him. Karras isn't better than him. But Dubravka and Karras should be pushing him. That's what you want to happen. You want someone to go, I want my place back, and especially Dubravka, I want my jersey back. I want to be playing for Newcastle. But when you see Dubravka and you see Nick Pope, there is a clear difference.
Okay. Well, let us know in the comment section below. I'm saying one thing as always. He's saying something else. Obviously, I'm the voice of reason. He reckons he's the voice of reality. Yeah, right. But anyway, let us know in the comment section below. Should Nick Pope be dropped? Maybe for the next game, maybe for the next couple of games, get his hunger back. Should we need to be Arteta ruthless? I know we're not a North London club, but again, if we want to be up there in and amongst the top 2, do we need to be ruthless in the goalkeeping situation? Let us know in the comment section below. See you soon.